the Newfound Glory CD came out. No, I would put that in college. I guess Vacant Andes was like high schoolish for me. And then I was in college. I went to the University of Miami. I was a film major. I had two jobs and a record label.
Jesus
and
Christ.
and I was booking shows. So I was like a maniac.
Welcome, everyone, to This Was the Scene, the podcast that takes a look back at the late 90s, early 2000 punk scene. I am your host, Mike Doyle. Before we start, feel free to support the podcast if you've been listening for a while or if you're new to listening for now by going over to my Patreon at patreon.com/thiswasthescene. You can sign up for $1 a month. That's all I charge, and that's just to help out because it takes a lot of time to do this, and it's awesome for people who do that. Fiddler Records was a small independent record label serving as the launch pad for several artists seminal to the pop, punk, and emo genres. Starting as the brainchild of a 16-year-old entrepreneur, Amy Fleisher Madden, in 1996, the label became well known for its early releases from marquee artists Dashboard Confessional and Newfound Glory. Over the course of 10 years, Fiddler Records developed a steady roster of successful artists such as The Bled, The Hire, Recover, Juliet and the Licks, Name Taken, and Classic Case. You can purchase some of their stuff over at fiddlerrecords.com. I reached out to Amy last year, but due to COVID, it took us a bit of time to make this happen. But I finally got her on the Skype, and this is what we talk about. Why re-releasing records sometimes doesn't work. How did she fund her first releases? What would she document if she could go back in time? Did she have other labels to bounce ideas off of? The band Milkshed. The reasoning behind the Shortest Distance, a South Florida compilation. Why selling band merch now can be a giant pain in the ass. Dashboard Confessional, the band Recover, and a ton more. This week's sponsor is Mint 400 Records. Mint 400 Records is an indie record label from New Jersey with bands across the United States, Canada, and Europe. The label features everything from indie rock and folk to post-punk and soul. Over 370 exciting releases. You can find Mint 400 Records releases streaming at Spotify, Pandora, Tidal, Apple Music, Amazon Music, Deezer, and more, or at all MP3 outlets worldwide. Visit mint400records.com for links and more info. Here's a clip from the song Rooftops by the band Ruby Bones.
It's a nightmare, it's a goddamn tragedy. There's a danger in the doorway, and it's all you'll ever see. You see, I remember in the autumn underneath.
Thanks again, Neil, for your support in the podcast and getting all these ads all the time. Last week I mentioned I've got some sticker packs. It's 2 for $2, and you can just Venmo _Mike Doyle, or you can PayPal thiswasthescene@gmail.com. Again, 2 stickers for $2. They're about 3 inches high by like 1.5 inches wide, so they're pretty perfect to go on laptops or bike helmets or things like that, or water bottles. You get the idea. I'm going to keep it short and sweet this week, so feel free to subscribe, leave a review, and share this with anyone who would love some punk rock nostalgia. With that said, let's get started.
But yeah, no, wherever you want to start is good. I'm sure you have to like find a jump-in point for editing and whatnot.
No, I just keep it. I basically, the whole thing just tells a story, because whatever we say here, it kind of it's like connecting the dots from back then of things where, because I saw things from the comfort of my home in New Jersey or in my car and listening to CDs or listening to zines. So wherever I was, I saw kind of a top line narrative that was fed to me. But there's all this behind the scenes stuff that's so interesting to learn about, because that was going on during this whole time. So I'm like, holy shit, that's why that happened, or that's why this thing was happening.
Yeah, for sure.
But I mean, this is actually kind of great because Matt's going to air before yours. Yours is going to air next week. And he had mentioned that he was like, yeah, we got courted by labels because he's like, we recorded a 3-song demo and then we went and recorded with Machine. And he was like, whoever picks you up, I want a percentage. And then he's like, we talked to a bunch of labels that ended up on Vagrant. And he said they were even talked to Columbia. But he didn't say every single label. But so you were looking to sign them.
Yeah, I loved their demos, and they were like young and creative, and then they went and recorded with Machine, which the deal that was presented to me, also this was 500 years ago, so it could be a little spotty. They needed to be bought, their album needed to be bought from the Machine, and it was like $50,000. And it was like, that's a really big budget for an unknown band kind of thing. Especially even back then, it's like, well, that's your whole budget, not just your recording budget. That's bigger than the whole budget. We tried, or I tried to work stuff out with the Machine and management, and it didn't work out. Like it was just not gonna happen. And I think this goes into bigger games, but there were certain labels trying to jockey their position against other labels, and just because I threw my hat in the ring, some other people threw their hat in the ring. Not, I think, not even because they liked the band or wanted the band. I think just because they wanted what I wanted. So yeah, that might be how their Vagrant story unfolded.
Well, you at that time, and this is like 2002, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And so at this time, you had already had, I mean, what were some of the bands that you, again, I'm going to jump back, but what were some of the bands you, because you would have been established at that point. I had heard of your label up and coming because of Newfound Glory and like those bands, people mentioning you or like the bands you had signed. So I had known of you. And then, so at that point, like who were the big ones on the label where if you're going to go look at someone, other labels are going, oh shit, if Amy's looking, then we got to really pay attention to this.
Yeah, there's a couple waves of Fiddler history, and the first, like, South Florida wave would be Newfound Glory and Dashboard Confessional. And then after I moved to Los Angeles, it was Recover and The Bled, and I guess Emmanuel is right in that pocket, right around there.
Oh, wow. Yeah, so that makes total sense.
Yeah,
Did you have a okay? So let's jump back now because I was gonna ask a question about like what you would budget for bands, but I want to get back to that if I remember. So
for sure.
and also really quick, thank you for doing this because I know I look at our email chain and it was February 20th, something like that last year. It was right before.
Oh
It was
my
like
gosh.
weeks before everything shut down.
Yeah, yeah. Thanks for sticking with me on this. It was we moved, and then the pandemic happened, and then the pandemic kept happening, and then eventually life is sort of normalish now, so I can do stuff like this, but it's been a minute since I could do something like this.
Oh, that's good. What are you doing now anyway? Like what's like your full-time gig?
That's a great question. I'm currently working on a photography book. It's a like an emo retrospective from 96 to 2006. That's pretty much the brunt of my like day to day, and I've been shooting a lot of bands lately, which is new and fun, or not so new, but I'm kind of rediscovering it in my life. I used to shoot a lot of the Fiddler bands, and I kind of forgot that I did that. It just seemed like part of something that I was doing, and it just didn't feel like a thing. Yeah, no, my days are very interesting. It's either am I working on a photo book, or am I shooting somebody, or am I working on another book that's a novel nonfiction creature, or doing design and things like that. So yeah, I have like 3 to 4 job titles at this point. I
That's
can't just,
awesome.
I'm a banker. That's what I am. I work in a bank.
Okay. That
No,
works.
that would be so much easier. Yeah.
I like because I'm fascinated by what everyone did after when things stopped. Like, because that's when even with Matt, he was like, yeah, I just lost who I was. I'm delivering pizzas or what was he doing? I think it was pizzas or I was working at a restaurant. But he's like, people would see me who were fans of Emmanuel and be like, dude, what are you doing? He's like, so it's like everyone had
Yeah.
this. I don't think everyone had an identity crisis, but there was that shift of this is who I am. And now, I mean, God, this is like 20 years later, and it's like people reference you as Amy Fiddler, so it's like that
Yeah.
stays around. It didn't go anywhere, but you're not doing that. So it's like when you have that title, you're going, all right, well, either my ego is going to get in my way, and I'm not going to do anything, and I'm just going to crack, or I'm going to have to get pushed past this and do something that's going to make me enjoy shit.
Right. No, right after I closed the label, I went into the publishing era, area of life. And I started a magazine called Death and Taxes, I believe is owned by Spin now. And then after that, I went back to college because I never finished college properly. And when I graduated, I started working in advertising, and I was a creative director in New York for a couple years. I'm on like career part 7.
That's fun.
Yeah, it's really fun to reinvent yourself every few years. They say it's good for your neural pathways.
I believe it. I've got like three things going on right now.
Well, there
That
you go. So you
yeah,
get it.
yeah, I totally get
Yeah.
it. Because I have to like shift gears constantly through the day, or it's either I'm animating something, or I'm like drawing this like comic thing, or I'm doing this. Like this, I'm taking time between these projects where I had a call with a client, and they're like, okay, we get these 4 videos that we need, and we have a deadline in the middle of July, and I'm thinking, fuck, man, I wanted to like take a road trip in July, and now I got to do this shit. And so I'm like, my brain's going all over the place. I was like, this is a nice time out to do something that I love and talk about this time period and give myself a time to like decompress by having conversation, which is it's kind of like it's nice. It's nice to have this.
It is. It's not. It's nice. It's a good check-in with life, I think.
Yes. All right, so let's go back in time. So let's go back to where you grew up and what was it that got you into the punk scene?
That's a great question. I think it was my older brother who wasn't really into the punk like local scene per se, but he got me into music. He was like 4 years older, so old enough to be like when I was 12, he was 16, so he was like very cool. He was like going to the first Lollapaloozas and going to see Nirvana, and like I would just see what he was doing, and I was just obsessed with it, even though I couldn't do it yet. By the time I think I was in high school, I made some really great friends. I went to this weird high school where everybody was kind of an outcast. Like we were all these little strange creatures and we found each other. So it wasn't like the punks versus the jocks kind of thing. Like everybody was weird. And I met, I guess I'm trying to think. I met a great friend named Jessie, who's still one of my best friends, and she ended up working at Fiddler for years and has her own super successful record label that's still going now.
What's
We
that
met
called?
when we were 14. Her record label is called Father Daughter. It's very indie, very cool. We kind of navigated local shows together. Her dad drove us to the first Warped Tour ever. Like, we were super young, but once I started going to shows, that's pretty much all I wanted to do. And my parents' house was really close to a local all ages venue. I convinced the owner of the venue to let me intern for free, like to do anything. I was like, I'll sweep up. I don't care. Just let me hang out here. And I ended up booking shows, which pretty much slid me into starting a record label from booking shows.
Let me ask you this though. A couple things popped up there. One, to do that, and there's certain people out there that when they're in a situation, either as a kid or an adult, they see an opportunity and they don't act on it. And by you doing that at that age, is that the first time you had taken a step where you were like, I like this, I'm going to do whatever it takes to be involved in this scene, so I'm going to just throw it out there. The easiest entry point is, hey, I'll work for free. Was that the first time you had done that, or is that something that was kind of instilled in you growing up to that point?
I was a pretty fearless kid. I mean, it's pretty interesting. I'm a very, I don't know how to put it. There's something about my mom that I think her generation was so different. She always wanted to be an architect, and because my grandfather was a builder, and yeah, I wouldn't say who forbid it because that's a little bit extreme, but he never encouraged it, and she always wanted to do it. And I think when I was young and I would get into things, she'd be like, "Well, why don't you do that? Like, why don't you just try?"
I
It was
love
a
that.
very like can do. If you like something, let's go for it.
Yeah.
And I don't think I really understood. that sort of angle with her and how it rubbed off on me. I don't think I understood that till like probably 10 years ago.
Really?
I yeah, she eventually went into real estate, which is like sort of house things, but not the same. And one day I was like, why don't you just go to graduate school for architecture? It doesn't matter about the money. Like if you always wanted to do it, like just go back. And she was like, I'm too old, the time has passed, the technology's too hard, I don't think I can do it. And I was like, that's not the can-do attitude that you gave me.
Yeah.
And I'd love to tell you that she went back to school and she's doing that now, but she's not. But,
I mean, the housing market is kicking ass right now, so maybe it was better for her.
I mean, she's doing really well in real estate, so that's a win for her. But I just think my mom, oddly enough, never wanted me to have like regrets. Like I remember being really not even close to college age, and there was a new type of college that popped up in New York City called the New School. I remember she brought me this brochure. I was like 12, and she was like, "You could go here if you want to go here. It's like it seems like it's for your kind of thinking," and I was just like blown away. So I got lucky with really encouraging parents, and my dad is a lawyer, which is a whole different kind of creative thinking, but they're like self-starting people. Like my dad works for himself. He always has, except for when he was really young, right out of college. So I've always had these like role models of get up, go to work, do the thing you're good at, and try. You have to try.
So when you got into the music scene, how soon when you started seeing bands play? There's something about someone's first show where that first show, maybe not be the exact first show, because I mean, I remember seeing shows or seeing bands play live, I think a couple times, and I was like, this kind of sucks. But there was something about it. And then I saw that one show where I was like, I need to, and this needs to be my life. So at what point? And then mine was I'm going to be in a band and tour. Like that was my goal, and then I did that. So with you, what was the point where something happened in the music scene and you were like, I need to start a label?
I don't know if you've read my book. I'm not trying to like give you a baited statement with that or anything, but
I
I
have
like
not.
re okay, so if you did, you would see a lot of parallels with the questions you're asking because I wrote my book about a person that books shows in town and goes on tour with a touring band. And I tried for book reasons and accuracy to like really remember my first show, and I just can't. It's all really mushy like that period of time. It's like 94, 95-ish. But I remember I saw Blink 182 play to like six people in my local venue,
Wow.
and I was just like, this is so cool. And then right in that pocket of time, I saw Hot Water Music, who's from up north in Florida. They're from Gainesville. So it was like they were not quite local, but I just remember seeing Hot Water and like the energy of it affected me like nothing else. There were two small record labels in the area. Actually, that's not 100% accurate. So a couple of us, like the strange people like me, we had fanzines, and a couple of people had moved into pressing records for people. It would most usually be like a split between two bands, and it was just for fun, and the artwork was like somebody would Xerox a poster of Evil Dead and do it by hand. Like it was very punk and very fun.
Yeah.
But the guys in Against All Authority had their own record label. I just like attached to them, and I was like, teach me everything about pressing and promotion, and they really took me under their wing and helped me out and helped me figure out how to start a company.
That's awesome. Actually, I interviewed Joe from Against All
Cool.
Authority, and
Yeah.
I interviewed Jason from Hot Water. So it's cool to like, because when they're talking about their time period, it's funny because I'm trying to, even now with the podcast, I've done so many bands and areas where I've done a lot of Florida bands and people who are from down there. And so it's like they're all crisscrossing at this time where someone else is starting something and it's like the other person's doing something. And I know at some point those paths cross, but sometimes in conversation, like it doesn't come up. So I'm loving that. Like you've, I mean, obviously you've met fucking so many people from the label and everything, but Joe is like I mean, Jason's awesome. He's great, and then Joe is like one of the fucking nicest people I think in like the world. He's so incredibly nice.
There was like a really good sense of community in Florida because a lot of bands and labels and pretty much any sort of legitimate industry thing ignored us because it was such a foreign territory and you would get no guarantee of kids showing up and whatnot. And it's kind of what made the scene an actual thing, where you could have a Hot Water Music and a Less Than Jake in the same sentence, and people wouldn't be like, "Ooh, that's kind of post-hardcore and that's ska, we won't mix that." Whereas in Florida, it was like, "Well, let's just get the most people we can to come to support the thing that we're doing." I think it's like we were almost on an island. I mean, it was not an island. I think maybe it's an isthmus, if
With the
that's the correct
peninsula, right?
peninsula.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not sure what an isthmus is.
Never heard of it, but sure.
Don't tell the writer police that I don't know what it is. But yeah, there's a huge sense of community because also like when things first started with like Newfound Glory, I would book a show in Miami or Fort Lauderdale, then I'd book a show in Orlando or Vero Beach, and then I'd book a show in Gainesville or Tampa, and that was a Friday, Saturday, Sunday. And
Jesus.
there was no internet, obviously, the way it is now. Like we had bulletin boards and maybe instant messenger, I can't even remember. But there was no like social networking. It was all word of mouth and who you knew, as in like friends, and then flyers from record stores and other shows. Everybody kind of knew each other in a like team effort sense. And of course there were like cliques and terrible people here and there, but it was largely very positive.
So, did you ever want to be in a band?
No, I have what you could call zero musical talent. As a joke in high school, we formed a high school band, like a punk band, to see if we could get in the local like high school newspaper. That was with my friend Jesse and two other friends. But I don't have any talent in that sense.
Was that a driving force, like when you were doing the label, like because you wanted to be part of the scene somehow? So you thought, okay, well, musically, I'm not going to do it, but business-wise, I think I've got something.
It didn't feel like that. It didn't feel like, well, I'm not a pitcher, so I might as well be a manager because I love baseball. Like it wasn't that logical of a step. It was like I felt like I finally found my people. And
Mm,
then through finding my people, I kind of found my calling, if you could call it that. It wasn't a like, I'm not good at baseball. I'll just run a team. It was not like that. But I definitely like just wanted to surround myself with it no matter what it was. Like I was one of those kids with 400 flyers covering my room, like every surface, like in the free posters that you get or you used to get at record stores
yep.
and things like that. Like I just wanted to be involved in it. I didn't care about the semantics of it.
So the first record you put out's a 7-inch by Vacant Andes, right?
Yes,
And isn't that Caraba's first band? Who is that?
it it was Karaba's first
Okay,
band.
that's it. Yeah, I actually just heard he just had some interview recently on some podcast, and he was talking about that. It's just interesting to me. It's awesome when you see someone who's become like that, like mega fucking famous, and they're just talking about that old school, and he's like talking about it like I mean, he still. It sounds like he still loves it. It's like it's still baked in him. So he'll like throw these names out there, and you're like, my God, it's so cool to like hear him still remembering this shit.
Well, yeah, we did that 7-inch together really early on. I think that was 96 or 97, and then it became kind of like a little bit of a collector's item in Florida, and then he moved on to different bands, and then like a year ago, no, I guess 2 years ago now because of pandemic timing, I was trying to revamp Fiddler stuff for Instagram just as like a landing page.
Yeah.
Like, okay, this can just be a place where people can see cool photos and share stuff. And I dug up all the Vacant Andy stuff and I was like, it'd be really fun if we put this out as like a re-release and redid the artwork because the artwork was always my least favorite thing of anything I've ever done.
Really?
Yeah, it just, after I closed Fiddler and I went to art school, first of all, I never liked it. And then once I became like a creative director, I would always just look at that cover and be like, oh, I just hate it so
I
much.
don't think it's that bad. I'm on your page right now. I mean, you've got like it's the place, you got two colors going on, which is good. You got that sketch there in the middle, which is good. Solid background. I mean, the font is hand drawn. It's all created from scratch. Not bad.
Yeah, no, it's not my favorite. And it was always like a sensitive spot because the bass player from the band drew that, and hopefully he doesn't listen to this and just hate me. But I just never liked it. So, and also like all of our careers have progressed exponentially since then. So I was like, let's just redo the art and put it back out and put it up on streaming. So like we had a little like moment of like, yay, it's back out in the world. And then that's it.
Why didn't you? Was there a way that you could have actually? I mean, if you pressed that, that would have sold.
You'd think so, but no. Like, there's a big difference in the world between people saying, I want that on the internet, and then people pushing click to buy.
I know that too well.
And a lot of the people that have that record already have it, and a new one, it just wouldn't really matter. I don't know. I thought about doing a pre-order and then just seeing if it gets to a certain number, but we just did it for nostalgia's sake. It wasn't to like make a new thing.
Oh, totally. Yeah, I know very well when you put something out there and you're like, "Hey, what do you think of this?" And everyone's like, "Yeah, yeah, yeah, yeah." And then you go, "Oh, here's the button to buy," and it's like crickets. You're like, oh,
Yeah.
okay, all
Yeah.
right.
No, I worked with this band called Name Taken. They have a very interesting fan base that's still very dedicated. I pressed their record, oh, I don't know, like almost 10 years ago. It just sat there for like a long time. And we advertised it and we put it out there. And then one day there was a petition on Facebook that reached me that was like, tell Amy Fiddler that she needs to press the Name Taken record. And I like just put a link up. I was like, hey guys, this is out. Could you at least Google before you start yelling? And then you'd think like the 192 people that signed the petition to be really angry with me would all buy it. And the sales didn't really like explode. It eventually sold out, and I still get like crazy emails that are like, "Can I please buy this record?" And I'm like, "Guys, you're like 10 years late again. Like you missed it. It didn't sell out quickly. Like it wasn't a hard sell." Yeah, I've become very aware on truth versus real sales on the internet.
Oh, totally.
And as much as I would love to do Vacant Andy stuff, the rabid mob of the internet isn't there to press click to buy.
So how are you getting money to do these first couple releases? You got Vacant Annie's, and you got the Scaladays,
Scala days.
Scala, yes, I guess Scaladays sounds like a Jersey way for me to say that. So
Very Jersey, very
very Jersey.
Sopranos. I All of the money that I would get from booking shows, I funneled right into a label. By the time I was like really into promotion, I would have like 2 to 3 shows per week, and like one would be national and two would be local. So I was making a couple $100s a week, which is a lot for a young kid without a like actual job. And it was, of course, cash. And back then, just here's your cut of the door, and it's just a big wad of cash. I don't know if the IRS is listening.
I was just gonna ask this one. That's the one question I've never asked anyone. And I'm not gonna. I'm just gonna put it out there that I've never asked. But I never talked about any record labels and said like, so how did you like actually budget for taxes? For me, like freelancing, I'm awful at it. I mean, I've got like payment plans set up for just fucking up for a minute. And so I was like, oh yeah, you need those quarterly payments. I don't think anyone tells someone in their teenage years like, are you sending in your quarterly payments? You're like, what the fuck are you
No,
talking
no
about?
one, no one tells you that. And I did have an accountant though back then because my parents were like, "This is just you have to do this on the books." But then, unbeknownst to them, I also was selling fake IDs because I had become really good at Photoshop
Oh my God.
doing flyers and things. So I had a computer and I had a scanner, and then I would print stuff out on like high quality photo paper, and then I would go to Kinko's and laminate fake IDs. So a lot of the early Fiddler stuff was financed by young children in Miami, Florida, drinking alcohol before they were supposed to.
Is that a story I'm guessing you've told many times, or?
I don't know if I have, and I don't know why I decided to just tell it today because I don't know if anybody's ever really asked me that specifically, like how did you finance things? I guess nobody asked. And also like I was probably scared to say that for so long,
I bet, yeah.
but like come on, kids do dumb shit.
If
I wasn't selling.
anyone got an Amy fake ID, please email me and just let me know. This was the scene at gmail.com. I would love that. I would love if someone's like, "Oh my God, that was her." That's amazing.
Yeah, well, I wasn't like a mass operation
It's like
for
three
like people I
people right
didn't
now.
know. Yeah. I think it was a small group of people, maybe not so small. I can't remember. It's not like I was selling drugs,
Right. Just
so
alcohol, technically. Not
just
really.
just small pieces of paper and plastic.
So what was your criteria in the beginning? Because your fourth release is Newfound Glory. So like obviously Vacant Annie's was I've never actually heard them. I've heard of them many times, but I never like YouTube them. So but I mean I'm guessing they're a punk band and then Scala Days is obviously ska. So were you kind of searching for a sound or were you just whatever is cool, I'm just gonna sign?
It's whatever I loved. I was definitely not searching for a specific genre, which in the beginning of Fiddler Things, everybody would comment on. It would be like, you can't put out a ska band and then put out a punk band and then put out, and nobody said emo back then, but the Vacant Indies were very emo. But Newfound Glory recorded their EP before they even played a show. It was a very front-loaded project because Newfound Glory was Chad Gilbert's band, and Chad was in Shai Hulud, and he already had like a word of mouth following, in like 100-mile radius of where we all lived. When he called me and was like, "I think I'm gonna start a pop punk band," I was like, "Yeah, I'll put it out. I don't need to hear it yet, but I'll put it out."
So did he call you with the sole purpose like he was like just because as a friend he wanted to kind of get your okay or as a friend or someone who is putting out releases he wanted you to be the person who put it out?
I don't know. I mean, you'd have to ask him. I don't know why he called me, but he called me because Shai Hulud was on Revelation, or actually Crisis, technically. I don't know why. I don't know why he was like, I choose you. And I don't know why I was like, I trust you. And we were pretty close back then as friends, so maybe it just seemed like a logical, like, duh. It's not really anything that happened on like a grand scale, but the Scala Days stuff was pretty successful, like in a time and place. So he might have seen what that was like and was like, yeah, I want to do that too. And I don't think in the very beginning, they definitely had like larger goals because Chad had actually been on tour and in the industry, so to speak. But I don't think any of us expected it was going to like blow up the way it did. So I think it was like, yeah, I'll do this with my friend and local record label and see where it goes.
So when he reached out to you and said he was starting this, so then so obviously it hadn't existed and then you go to see them, how quickly like when you saw them the first time, did it blow your mind kind of like how you said Blink did, or were you kind of like, oh, it's good?
It was a completely different experience because I wish I can remember, but I can't. They either had a demo or I just straight up trusted them because they hadn't played a show and they were in the studio recording the EP. I feel like I maybe saw them at a practice space. I feel like I wouldn't have completely jumped in sight unseen.
Hmm.
But their first show was their release show. So like we were ready. Like they were like our first show is going to be massive. There's going to be CDs, there's going to be shirts, we're going to have merch. Like it's we were like ready for the game, whereas like my first few releases were like, how do I do this? What are we doing? Where are the shirts? I don't know. Like the boot camp had paid off.
Yeah.
And Newfound Glory worked for a myriad of reasons, but largely because they all went to different high schools. So that they were pulling from like not just one source of word of mouth. Like most of Fort Lauderdale was excited about the band. It was like if you were a kid and you were into music, you were excited about Newfound Glory.
So I interviewed Ian, and I can't remember. This is like 2 years ago, and it was interesting from him because he alluded that he was a very much of a mastermind of getting shit going because he kind of
He really was. He
yeah.
really was.
I had never known that until like he had said that in the interview. I was like, man, I thought you were just the quiet dude playing bass. Like I didn't realize that he was the one nudging Drive through like, hey, you got to tell them we need to tour. And they're like, oh, we listen to Richard and Stephanie, now we need to tour. So I was like, man, you were kind of pulling the strings.
No, Ian was always, and probably still is, I don't know, in love with this band called Unwritten Law. And he and his brother were like super fans and they would follow them on tour and like had every piece of merch and they were really tapped into what like a band on a national level was doing. And Ian was older than all of us. I think he was out of high school. I can't remember if he was going to community college or what, but he knew what to do. He was the guy that was like, we need stickers, we need patches, we need buttons, like we need to go. And I was like, let's go. Like
Yeah.
because the other bands were either like not interested in all of this stuff, and the stuff is like my favorite part because I don't deal with the music. I'm not writing music. So I loved working with Ian in the beginning. He was just like a driving force in the whole thing for sure. Because
That's
also Chad was younger in high school and he had Shai Hulud tour dates on top of that. So there were even some Newfound Glory tours where Chad was not involved. Ian was very much like, this is my career. I'm moving forward. Who's coming with me? He was really cool.
Yeah, that was interesting because I think I'm gonna jump off this in a second, but I think he had mentioned he like told his dad he took his tuition money or something and used it towards something instead. Um, I forget what it was, but yeah, I thought that was fascinating. So
Yeah, I think he like bought all of their gear or something.
something like that.
He's one of those kids that when you see them talk to their parents, they talk like adults. Like it's not like very kid and dad vibe. It was very like two adults discussing the future. Um,
So
and his parents were super supportive. The thing that Ian did that I wish I could go back in time and either fix it or preserve it, but Ian always had a video camera. He recorded everything, and I wish I had done that too, but I didn't have a camera back then, but he always recorded everything. I'm sure at this point it's like just people making fart noises and like driving around haphazardly, but he had the foresight to know like I'm gonna document this. Like he was ready. So it was really cool.
would you have focused on the behind the scenes of the label or just the bands, going to shows or things like that? What would have been your focus?
I would have done everything. The strange thing, my family's not really a video family. Like, we don't have like family videos, even on like Super 8, like some people do from years and years ago. Like, my family just doesn't mess with like linear footage of time. Yeah, if I could go back, I would shoot and video everything. So that would be my like takeaway for people that are doing bands now. But obviously they have phones and they do record everything. So that was something that I wish I had so much more of.
There's a band in Jersey. You ever hear? So I never even prefaced this. Like I grew up in playing, like I played in the Jersey scene, like so from like '97 to 2001. Like that was the era I lived in. So Jersey was my focus and going to local shows and things like that. And we had this band. I never saw them, but this band called Jiker. Did you ever hear them?
No, I can't remember somebody named Jiker. But what band were you in Jersey?
We were called Lanemeyer
Oh, I've totally seen your band.
in Florida.
No, I think you guys played the Wayne Firehouse
Yeah, yeah, that was
when
like
I
down
was
the street
there
from us.
with like Midtown
Yep.
and Hot Rod Circuit, maybe.
I don't know if we were playing the Hot Rod Circuit. Was this when it was was it on a stage or was it on the floor?
There was, I've been there for both. I can't remember, but I love John Cusack. So like I remember seeing your name on the flyer and being like, Lane Meyer, that's a better band name than Poopy Pants. But no, I thought you guys were cool. I was like, this
Oh, that's
band's
awesome.
good. I like this band.
Oh, that's cool. Thanks.
It was a weird era though, where it was like there was what was the band that was it River Phoenix, just spelled really weird with E's? There was River Phoenix, and then there was you guys. There were a couple bands that had like movie name or actor names, and I was like, okay, this is a thing. This is cool. I like
Yeah,
this.
yeah. We always wanted to do a 7-inch split or split 7-inch with a band called Charles DeMar. Even though we didn't know them, we were like, this would be so great because that's this his best friend's character. That's the character name
Right,
in the movie.
right.
We're like, oh, that'd be so cool. But there was this band called Jiker, and I never saw them, but there was a rumor or I don't know if the story was true or not, but apparently they would bring a toilet on stage with them, and one of the guys would like shit in it or something.
Oh my
Like,
God. Yeah, that was the Poopy Pants vibe, like very Gigi Allen, very Guar, but like ska. So it was weird. Yeah, those kids were maniacs.
well, if anyone has a connection to them, I'd love to interview them for an episode. It'd be amazing.
So here's the thing. So the Poopy Pants kids were so subversive and aware of their effect on people that they never even used their full names in the band.
Genius.
And then like recently, you know how like Instagram or whatever, I think maybe it was Facebook, it was like people you might know. Like one of them popped up and I was like, holy shit, that's the kid from Poopy Pants. They're the people that are not on social media. Like they're still that weird in a good way. Thank God somebody's not on social media. But
True.
yeah, no, I wasn't like buddies with them. Like we lost touch over the years.
So I'm looking at the releases, and number 4 is Newfound Glory. It's all about the girls, and then it goes Milkshed, the agency, Poopy Pants, various artists. So then you go to a comp, Gray AM agency, and Dashboard. So there is about about 5 releases in between Newfound Glory to get to Dashboard. So when Newfound Glories that came out, did that basically pop off as financially as I'm guessing it did, and then that helped you fund the next 5, or like how did that all work when their release came out?
So you're like approaching it from a very professional and like academic financial viewpoint, but
Well, I
stuff
can
back
do
then,
that. I can do that as an afterthought, like hindsight's 2020. But I know when you're
yeah,
in it, you're not thinking of it like that. But you look back, you're like, holy shit, that actually did fill the bank account. I was able to do these things.
no. So I kept banks, I kept banking separate for the bands because thank
Ah,
God I did, because for some reason I knew that if I sold a thousand Newfound Glory CDs, which I did rather quickly, I knew that I would need to make more. And if I took that money and put it into 3 other bands, I wouldn't be able to keep pushing Newfound Glory. So I
interesting.
kept things really separate. And, the budgets back then were so small, like, $1,000 for recording, that sort of thing, because I was still using local studios and engineers that I'd known for years at that point. Of course, there's promotion and advertising, but like we're talking like a full page ad in a zine called Nothing Left in Pennsylvania. This is not like budgeting. And I was still booking shows. Most of the money was coming from shows. It wasn't like one of my crops popped up and now I'll plant 5 more. It was like the corn is doing well. I need to stay with the corn.
Was that like a thing though that when you talked to other labels as you were growing, did you find that they were doing the similar thing and they were like, yeah, this is the smart way to do it, or they were doing it the other way?
If I had if I had another label to talk to at any point in my career, I feel like my life would be vastly different, but I was completely alone in the dark. I didn't really get friendly with another record label like on a professional level until because also back then distribution was I would send 20 to 100 CDs to tiny independent distributors like Lumberjack was really small, or actually Lumberjack was the biggest of all of them back then, but they got really big after that. But it was like Lumberjack and Bottleneck and Rots and Choke and all these people that nobody's ever heard of. EVR had distribution back then for small
Yeah.
labels. And those people for me were people that I either talked to on a phone for 5 minutes or over an email or even like a letter. There was no relationship, and the only people that actually reached out to me and were human to me was Dirk, who had Doghouse and Lumberjack.
Okay.
After, I don't even know if it was one or two pressings of Newfound Glory, they offered for me to go exclusive with them for the whole catalog, and I was just like ecstatic. I was like,
Wow.
okay, I've figured something out. I unlocked something. Because with all of the like tiny distributors, you'd have to chase them down, and some would never pay you, and stuff would go missing in the mail. It was just like very small. To be really frank, like nobody talked about money with each other. I wish I had maybe the courage, I don't know what it is, to like feel comfortable to ask Dirk, like, how do I figure this out? But no one ever, because it was also like, if you had a label that was doing well, you had some sort of secret sauce.
Yeah.
And A, no one wanted to help you because you had the secret sauce. And B, they didn't think you needed help because you figured it out. So it was like a catch 22, I think.
You know, it's funny. I've been kind of noticing that with podcasts lately. Podcasts to me have
I'm
seemed,
sure.
yeah, there seems to be this like they're like the new band label where I'm talking to everyone about bands back then. I'm thinking, man, like why was everyone so afraid of another band making it big? I mean, your songs were like 2 minutes long, and I'm looking at podcasts now, and some of them there's like I've had people like be like, "Hey, can I come on your podcast to talk about mine?" I was like, "It doesn't really." I'm like, I don't do that because I'm like, it doesn't fit the format because I want to talk about the late night. I'm like, if you are a person from then, that's great. So I'm like, it just doesn't match. But I think there is this. If you have an hour or so of time, then there's a big difference because you're capturing an audience for a great amount of time compared to maybe 30 minutes of a record or 2 minutes of a song, and you can have other bands peppered in where it isn't like a competition.
I think no matter the industry or the medium, people are real cagey about success.
Yeah.
And because there's always the like, well, I've worked harder than you, and I've been doing this longer than you, and I've put so much more in it than you, that no one wants to like be like, sure, come on board and let's talk about sailing.
Yeah.
My metaphors are wild today, by
I
the way.
love
I
them.
don't
They're
know what.
great.
Yeah, farming and sailing. But yeah, I think people are real proprietary feeling about like, I figured it out and I'm not going to share it, which is
Yeah.
hilarious in the internet age that we live in, where you can almost Google anything technical and maybe things stylistically as well.
You can, but there's a thing about you can see a tutorial, but to put the time into it, that's a
Oh,
big
100%.
difference.
A hundred
Yeah,
percent. That's what I mean. Like, everybody should just be a little more relaxed about things.
totally.
Like, everybody's trying, you know?
Yeah, I totally
Um,
agree.
but yeah.
So Newfound Glory, like they were their own bank account, Milkshake was their own bank account. So when you did that, I mean, that's smart as hell because that doesn't get you in a jam where all of a sudden you're out, Gray AM's like, hey, we need to re-record this, and you're like, oh, or like they're not selling as much. I'm not saying they didn't sell as much, but I'm just taking an example. Like if they're not selling as much, then Newfound Glory comes around like, hey, we need another 1,000 or 2,000 copies. You're like, crap, I just threw that in this album, and I'm screwed.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's oddly fortunate and sad for some others, but like, not all of the bands popped at the same time and at the same level. What's super weird is Milkshed became this like weird cult classic following where like I just sent a CD to a kid in Japan. There are no Milkshed CDs. Like I made 1,000 of them. They never sold. Like it took years and years and years for those to sell out. And then now it's like a collector's piece, collector's item, whatever. And this kid was like, I am a Milkshed fan. Can I have a Milkshed CD? And I was like, hey, bud, there's no Milkshed CDs. And he was like, will you burn me one? And I was like, it's on streaming now. You can just stream it. And he said his family won't allow him to stream records. And I was like, Okay, I'll burn you a CD. Like, just please stop asking me.
And then pay the $40 for shipping to get it overseas.
He PayPal'd me $50. He was like, and I was like, it's 34. And he's like, no,
Wow.
I'm gonna pay you extra. I was like, you don't have to do that. That makes me feel cheap. But okay.
And that was the most money you made on Milkshed.
I made $12 on Milkshed this week. That was the only profit I've ever gotten from that band.
Was there a point though, like when I'm sorry I cut you off, but I think like it's like when when a release like that comes out and you see it and you're going to the release show and all of a sudden there's that moment where it hits you, you're going, it's almost like Job in Arrested Development. And you're like, I made a giant mistake, or fuck, I'm fucking that line up. But it's like I made a big mistake. Like, did you think of it like that when a band didn't really sell as much, or was it
No,
not as that bad?
I never did, and it's probably because if I let the doubt in, I never would have kept going. And I had this like blind faith and like relentless hope that like they just need to tour. They just need to keep going. And like Milkshed never toured on my watch. They put out an EP with somebody else, or maybe they self-released it, I can't remember, after my record, and a couple members in the band changed, and then they finally like did a tour, like one singular wow, you left the state kind of thing. I did always see positive momentum when bands would put in the work. And like even when we would have the worst tours and the worst shows, the agency had some rough moments of like, well, the show was supposed to be in South Dakota and it's canceled, so we're driving to Utah, I guess. And then it's a house show, and then there's 20 kids, but every kid buys two things and you make friends for life kind of thing. So I just always like had this like I don't know what it was, and I wish I had it now. I just had this energy where I was like, we just have to keep going. We just have to keep trying. So yeah, no, I don't think I've ever had that like I've made a huge mistake feeling.
I've made a huge
Um,
mistake. That's it.
yeah, I've made a huge mistake. There's always money in the banana stand is how I would feel. I would be like, there's always money in the banana stand. We just have to make it to the banana stand. And also, obviously, financial things mattered, but it was never about money for me. It was never like, well, I made $1,000 on Newfound Glory and only $20 on Milkshed, so fuck Milkshed. Like, it was never like that for me. Like, I loved all of them personally and dearly, and I cared about all of them.
Well, however, though, there must have been some kind of energy that when you had to put your time to someone, because I mean, you have at that point by Milkshade, you got 5 releases out, and I mean, I don't know how many of them are, obviously New Found Glory is still going, and then Scala Days, like, and Vacant Andes, were they still? Because Vacant Andes, I think it was done at that point, and then it was Further Seems Forever, and then he was doing Dashboard, right?
Yeah, and Chris had a brief stop over in the agency before or either during Further Seems Forever, I can't remember. It's they all kind of like ebbed and flowed in this organic fashion. Like the Vacant Andes, slowly disappeared, stopped playing, and then the Scholadays did also. A couple of those guys went on to be in a band called Drag Body that's super good, and everything kind of like had its moment as time went on. It's also like I could feel band dedications when something was happening. It was like they were ready to go, they were ready to tour, they figured out a van, they figured out school, like they quit their job, like you could feel when a band was like ready to go. So there was never a like you guys aren't doing anything. It was like everything was moving in this like wonderful linear fashion.
Well, I guess like my question was that you said I never would, it would never take the wind out of your sails if a band's sales weren't doing as well. But at the same time, if you have multiple things happening, and let's say you got 4 or 5 bands that are active at that point, and one's doing better, I mean, you got to figure out how to balance your day. So when you're going like, okay, well, my day consists of, I mean, all the things like distro, and then
Sure, that makes sense like 100% now as a 40 something year old human being. My day is super important, but 20 years ago, I was a fucking maniac. Like I never slept. I was always on the phone, and everything was all at once all the time. Like
That's awesome.
there wasn't any sort of like, well, these guys aren't working real hard, so I'm not going to work on their record, and this record's not selling well. It was like everything got crazy, pushed on attention all the time. I was a total hyper kid maniac.
Were you in high school still at this point, or did you graduate by then?
I graduated high school in '97. As the Newfound Glory CD came out, no, I would put that in college. I guess Vacant Andes was like high schoolish for me. And then I was in college. I went to the University of Miami. I was a film major. I had two jobs and a record label.
Jesus
and
Christ.
and I was booking shows. So I was like a maniac. Maybe that's why I'm so tired all the time now. I'm tired from back then.
It's like someone who just has like knee pain because they play a lot of sports back in the day. It just like showed
Yeah.
up. You're just tired. You just have fatigue,
Yeah,
mental
it's like
fatigue.
PTSD fatigue 20 years later.
You just did an interview for the last scene, right? Didn't you get on the doc that
Yes.
Kyle
Yes.
Kildale's doing? Yeah. I mean,
Yes, with
there's
Kyle.
this like resurgence going around where all of this stuff is happening, where all this
Yeah.
media is coming out. Like that documentary, there's a book coming out. You're working on a book and photography. Podcasts are coming out. Like, so have you been kind of making the rounds, like out of nowhere, just getting people reaching out to you where you're like, what the fuck is this?
Yes, there is a rash of emo stuff happening. It's a lot for me because I feel like I left music for a little while to like get some space and perspective and like try and have normal life things. And then while I was gone, obviously it just kept going. Um, it's cool that it's happening, and I'm like happy to be a part of it and remembered, which is very nice. But, at a certain point, it's starting to get a little bit repetitive, which isn't anybody's fault, but like it's I feel like everybody's asking the same questions.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think it's cool. I mean, my daughter is 5, and I feel like when she's 15, there'll be a wealth of things for her to look at and read and listen to that she can be like, "Oh, that's what mom did when she was younger." And that'll be cool.
Yeah, I can imagine. I mean, there's like only so much that's out there where I I try to like not ask the same questions, but I'm pretty sure it is repetitive and it comes up. And even when I'm listening to podcasts of people being interviewed, I'm like, man, they're telling that same story again. They're telling that same story again. But at the same time, there are points where there's an audience that might only see the one thing, really.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I agree. With the photo book that I'm working on, a lot of the images were legitimately negatives in a box in a basement or a storage space or in their mom's garage or whatever, that images that had either never been seen or never been archived. So I feel like I'm trying to like preserve something and bring light to something that hopefully people will want to see and take part
Well,
in.
there's a punk rock museum, I think, in Ohio. Someone's been talking about this.
Hmm,
They're looking for memorabilia to go in there.
interesting. Well, there's
Yeah.
the Rock and Roll Museum in Ohio.
No, this is like
It's
legit a
punk
punk.
rock.
Yeah, someone brought this. I forget who. It might have been Joe. I think it was Joe from Against All Authority. Like they reached out to him for a guitar or something to send
That's cool.
to there. Yeah, so maybe that's something, obviously you want to put the book out and get the money on the book for having your own photos, but maybe there's some you can just blow up and send their way.
Yeah, I'll send them a box of negatives to spend a year looking through.
That's right. Those will be all poopy pants.
Here you go, guys. This is for you.
So when you put out the various artist comp, was that like a time where you kind of saw other labels? Was there any like strategy behind that, or are you going, all right, there's only so many of these local bands I want to put out. Let me just throw one song on each and give them some exposure so they can, so I don't have to feel like I have to put all their releases out.
No, 100% it was a different strategy, and I actually had a strategy on that one. Okay, so I lived in Miami, and the next city north of Miami that had like a quote unquote scene was Fort Lauderdale. And driving 20 minutes to between the two cities was not a big deal for me. Like I'd be like, I'll go either place to see a show, but the general population mindset was like, oh, it's too far. And it would make sense if I said like, oh, we don't have a car or we can't get there, but no, everybody had cars. Like every little, friend subset had a driver. It was seriously just that people were like, it's too far, I can't make it. Because I would flyer for shows that I'd be promoting in Miami. I would go up to Fort Lauderdale, and I used to, when there were larger like national shows that I wasn't involved in, I would flyer the kids in the parking lot. I would talk to people and I'd be like, you should come out. It's really fun. This band is really good. And they'd be like, oh, it's so far. I'm not gonna drive 20 minutes. Super mathy, dorky thing. The shortest distance between 2 points is a straight line. So I had this idea of having a compilation of half Miami bands and half Fort Lauderdale bands. And if I put them on one CD together, maybe kids from opposite towns would visit each other.
Interesting.
That one, that record is a big like high point for me because I was such a Hot Water Music fan that I became by default such a Scott Sinclair the artist fan. And I emailed him out of the blue and I was like, I love your work and I love Hot Water. Like, would you be interested in doing artwork for this release? And he said yes. And he didn't charge me a lot, I think, if anything. And he gave me the original artwork at the end of it too, which is like so crazy. That one was like a big, like, felt good in my heart kind of thing. Like that artwork is hanging over my desk right now. Like it's like one of my most treasured things I own.
Yeah, I'm looking at it right now on the image. That is sick.
Yeah, it's really cool and it's really big. Like the actual painting is like 4 feet long and it's two panels and then there's an extra piece for the back artwork and it's just I felt like there aren't a lot of moments in my life where I felt like A, something awesome is happening and B, cool. And I felt really cool when that came out. I was like, it has cool artwork and all the bands and I'm doing something cool.
Yeah.
I had a moment.
So when it came out, like, did it do as well? Did it do the thing that you wanted it to? Did it actually get people to start driving to shows that they didn't want to go to?
I think it did. I don't know if I could see it immediately, but when I would, haul my life back and forth between the two cities, I could definitely feel like more of an engagement between the kids. And it sold really well. I think I can't remember if I was smart enough to price it like super cheap. I think it was like $5 at shows. So I had like, multiple CDs that were $10 and then a fiver, and it was like, oh, the fiver's selling really well. So it was cool. It was a cool little moment.
It's funny that that was your idea to have that happen, but you didn't really set up a metric to see. I mean, granted, again, you're, fucking 18, 19 years old, so, but
There's
like,
no metric.
there really is
There's
no
no
metric.
metric.
There really is none. I mean, honestly, there is no way of being like,
I'd have to like walk up to people and be like, "Hello, where are you from, and how did you get inspired to visit this destination?" There's no way.
you're like, get up on the bike before the show. It's like, okay, everyone, raise your hands. Who heard my
Yeah.
comp and why did that make you drive here? Like, all right, 1, 2, 3. Okay, there's the metric. Good.
Yep, exactly. There was no way of measuring that back then.
So when you're at this time, you're going to school and you're doing all these things and you're doing the label. So it sounds like you took obviously a very smart approach. It's kind of like when like the Lawrence Arms back in the day, they were still going to college and they were tour. So they finished college, but they tour on the weekends. So they were like, okay, we have our degree and now we can go do the band. Were you doing both where you're like, okay, I'll get the degree, but then my main thing is I want to just have the label. I'll keep this around so when I'm done, I have that degree and I can just focus on the label so I'm not screwed if it doesn't work out.
Yeah, I think it kind of ties back into me talking about my parents. I had so much respect for my parents and like I was so grateful for the life that they provided for me that their one rule was you got to finish college. And I was halfway through college and I was miserable. Like I didn't see the point of it anymore because I was successfully running a small business. And then I was working on campus to help pay tuition. And it just, like, at a certain point, I got really just over it. And, I wasn't a rebellious, snot-nosed teenager type person, but I think in my late teens, early 20s, I hit this, like, I can't fucking do this anymore, and I'm dropping out because I was doing the weekends. I think every young band that had any bit of success can relate to this, where you're like having the best fucking time on the weekend with your best friends and playing shows and driving around and eating terrible food at Denny's at 3 o'clock in the morning and sleeping on floors. And then you like drive home and it's Monday morning at 8 a.m. and you're in a film history class and you're like, why am I here? I don't know why I'm here. I don't want to be here. And I'm paying to be here. I don't want to be here. There was a big blowout with my parents when I left college, but I left after I think I started my junior year and I didn't finish. And then right after that, I started going on like national tours and just disappearing.
So did that work out the way that you wanted it to for a good amount of time?
Yeah, it did. It was the right decision. You know, I finished college eventually and on my own terms and on my own time, which was wonderful when I actually wanted to do it. I think the moral of the story there is like only do a really big thing when you want to do it. Otherwise, it's a complete and total waste of time.
Oh, totally.
Like
Yeah.
when I meet younger kids that are like, my parents are making me go to school, but I want to be in a band. I'm like, then fucking drop out of school, man, because
Yeah.
you're not going to get anything out of it and you're going to waste everybody's time and money. Just bail.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, I ended up going to school in 2004. Like I was 24 years old, and I was like, "Oh, this is what I want to do. Now I'll pay money to do this." Instead, like,
exactly.
yeah.
Like, I just needed the noise to get turned down a lot, and then I enjoyed it so much.
So I'm basically just going through like your discography. You know, I'm not trying to just do it because I'm trying to like jump in it because that time period, like with the questions and things. But Gray AM, I remember them, and I can't. I mean, I could easily go on Spotify and listen to them, but they came up
I don't
recently.
think you can.
Oh, really? Do you have the only
Yeah.
release?
What's that?
Did you have the only
I
like release from them?
believe so.
Oh, because Mid
Um,
Carson July, Brian from Mid Carson July, he was talking
yep.
about them, and like they were like boys back then.
Those two were peas in a pod.
Yeah.
There might be like a split 7 inch somewhere, or an EP, but as far as I know, the Gray M is off streaming services. Sadly, though, that record doesn't stream enough to justify the yearly fee. It's like it's it didn't last. I don't know how to say it. I don't know what to say.
It's probably on YouTube. Honestly, if I look it up, because everything's on YouTube. Like so many of
I
them.
put it on YouTube. So the
Okay.
records that I released that don't really have any sort of streaming weight, I put on YouTube, like high quality with real art and everything. Because I don't want stuff to disappear, but I don't want to pay X amount of dollars per year for it just to sit there.
Have you heard of Printful?
Printful. What is Printful?
It prints T-shirts on. It prints merchandise on demand.
Yes, I have. Yes. Um,
Like
yes.
you basically if you have a website and you have like let's say
No, yeah, no, I
WordPress.
know. There's so many of them, and
Yeah.
they're all missing vowels, like art shirt, like
Yeah.
spelled weird.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've looked into stuff like that. Why do you ask?
Just for that pure reason where you have all these bands where maybe this is just me just giving unsolicited advice, but I always see there's an opportunity with all these labels that have are debunked or they're like done, but they still have maybe some licensing or something. They can upload artwork and then sell something, so like they don't have to hold stockpiles of it, but could just be print on demand and just sent to somebody.
So it's a great idea, and I think I've looked into it before. There's a couple problems. First problem is none of these bands that haven't made it through the years still have band entity bank accounts or business licenses or anything like that. So if I start making Gray AM t-shirts, I have to chase down 4 or 5 individual people, some that are off the grid, to pay them their royalty and
Yeah.
whatnot, and then it becomes like a tax headache. Because if you take 10 bands times 5 dudes, that's 50
Uh,
people. Then I'm 1099ing and W4ing and all of this stuff, and it turns out to be about $26. So it's a little bit of a headache, like the juice isn't worth the squeeze. Um, some bands that I've kept up with will have a member that has children or somebody needs a little extra help financially, and the band will mutually decide, like, yo, just give the royalty to this person. But the bands that have fallen by the wayside, like, I don't know. Maybe I'll look into it.
I mean,
And
it's yeah.
some bands are like totally anti everything. The agency doesn't want to do anything ever. Two of the three dudes that are the original members of the agency, they're into it. A third member is 100% against any streaming, any merch, anything. And it's like everybody has these big feelings about shit, and it gets really complicated.
Did that annoy you back then? Like, were you like, seriously?
I mean, that stuff didn't happen back then. This is a now thing.
Oh,
This
yeah?
is a like, yeah.
Interesting.
I mean, when bands were current, there were no problems like that. But now it's like contagious. Like once I start pushing on one Fiddler band, then I get an email that's like, "Hey, why aren't we doing vinyl?" And it's like, "Well, your CDs never really sold. Your stuff isn't streaming well. Vinyl's really expensive. Like I know you really want the record with your name on it so you can put it in your room, but it's not worth a $5,000 jump."
That's man, it's so interesting hearing the both sides of this because like I'll talk to bands and their disappointment, the labels, and I've talked to a lot of labels, not their disappointment in the bands, but just their perspective, and it really helps you develop like a very gray area where you it's like you just have to see it for the situation that it is, and you could sit there and go, all right, I could see both sides in this, but like it's like a hard it's I definitely have talked to both sides where they're like, I get it, I totally get it. But then there's these things where they're like, I'm not gonna budge on this. Like, what the fuck? And you're like, all right. Not it's not that you just said that, but I mean that's sometimes you get that.
To be, I mean, I don't think the guys would mind, but to be transparent, there's a band, The Hire, and their record that I put out still streams pretty well, and their fans have aged with the band and like they still care about it. And a couple of the members wanted to do vinyl, but vinyl, like I said, is super expensive, and I'm sure you already know that. Their fan base is not a vinyl buying fan base. And I was just like, we could put a pre-order up if you want and see how many sell, but I need you to put work behind it on your end. If there's not going to be a reunion show, if there's not going to be like a something, it's just sometimes like lighting money on fire.
Yeah.
So I don't know. And I have to be, nowadays, I am very careful about what I'm spending energy and time on because it's very limited. But yeah, I mean, and it's the total opposite with some other bands where I want to do something like I would love to do something with the agency. They don't. They're like, we're done. We're out. I don't want to talk about it. So
Interesting.
everybody's different.
Everyone has those ethics of whatever they're in it. They're like, that's cool, man. Just some people want our stuff, or they're like, yeah, we don't need ties to the internet. It's crap. You're like, okay.
So yeah, some people are so like cagey and they're like, that music sucks. I don't want to be associated with it. I'm in a much cooler band now, and it's like that attitude sucks, man.
Yeah,
Like
it does.
enjoy that for the rest of your life. Good on you being positive. Way to go.
That's so true.
Yeah.
I know you've probably been. I know there's things you can't talk about Dashboard. Obviously, this stands out in front of me because it's a pivotal point. And just for me personally, like when Swiss Army Romance came out, my buddy Chris, he actually. Did you ever hear of a band called Day at the Fair?
I don't think so.
So Chris was in Landmeyer, and then when he quit, he started Day at the Fair, and he basically started that because of that record. He was living out in L.A. He was working for Drive Thru at the time, and he's like, yeah, this dude like was hanging out in my apartment and we were drinking beers with a bunch of people over and he starts playing an acoustic song. I think it's a band called Dashboard Confessional. And he's like, you got to listen to this shit. And I was like, holy shit. So then he went off and started acoustic and then he started another band again. I know, like you had said, you're like, you get asked the same questions over and over again. So I'm trying to avoid that with this. And there's things you can't say. But like, what do you like talking about that record where you don't get asked a certain like a specific question about that record or like that time period with Dashboard?
That's a good question. I don't uh I don't know. I don't know. It's like this weird thing that happened really quickly and all different parts of it worked and then it just exploded. I don't really know how to even talk about it. I mean, look, Chris and I, we both did this. We both did interviews, and we still have that thing where like we won't talk for a while and then we talk and then it's like we haven't missed a minute of it. So our brains are very much still in sync, which is crazy after all of these years, which is also a great Neil Young song, I think.
I have no idea. I have
um,
no care for Neil Young, but
it's
anyway.
still crazy after all these years. I don't know. I I don't know what I want to talk about with it.
Well, let me ask you. So I'll ask you questions. If you've been asked that, just be like, "Yeah, I answered that." Like, so you don't have to like dive
Okay.
into repeat it. So, I mean, you guys were friends. He's your first release, Vacant Andy's first release, and then you said he was in the agency. So like, you had this past. You had this. It's interesting that you have this whole timeline together, and then this record comes out. It's number 11 by you, 11th release, and it's about 4 years after you start the record label
Yeah.
technically, and this thing just fucking goes nuts. And then from there, it goes to he's going to drive through, and I talked to Jason Link, who works for Epitaph, and he was doing he did the website for Dashboard for the release on drive through, and then when that fell apart and he went to Vagrant, Richard apparently went to Jason. This is in the interview, it's out there, but he went to interview it. He went to Jason, was like, he wanted him to write some shit about him on the website, and Jason was like, yeah, I don't want to do that. And then it like kind of
Yeah.
like burnt some ties for that. And I remember, because I mean, it's like you think back to that time period, there's certain little dramas that are going on where the business side got in it, and then you saw how people really reacted to shit. And so in this case, I didn't realize. I just saw it as he put this out with you. It went then got bought out by either Drive Thru or Vagrant, and then that was it. That's all I know about it.
I'll give you the timeline bullet points. So I put out the Swiss Army Romance. It did really well. There were lots of tours. I sold the record to Drive Thru. Drive Thru wanted to sign Chris. It didn't work out. I then started working at Vagrant, and then I signed Chris to Vagrant, and I worked his whole record cycle of the next record of Places, aka Places You've Come to Fear the Most. I think what is interesting that everybody is still talking about that I don't know if people even knew about when it was happening is it was fantastic and it was magical and everything was moving really fast, but like at every single point, people were trying to completely ruin and sabotage my career and Chris's career. And to this day, it's still, people still kind of take jabs and like try to devalue the thing that he is and the thing that we did. And it's really interesting, like the facets of human personality that come out when you have like a lightning success experience. And no, and by lightning I don't mean like it happened overnight. I mean like once
Just
in a lifetime
once
kind of
once
thing.
it starts, it just like skyrocketed from that point on. Prior to that, it's like before the Big Bang, you know.
Yeah, exactly. It
Yeah.
like started human evolution. So, not that that's the magnitude of it, but like it still affects both of us. Like Chris, it still sucks when I think I'm like having a problem finding words because I'm trying to be very careful.
Yeah.
After like years and years of wounds healing and perspective and apologies and things like that have happened, you still feel the like tone that people have, and by no means do I mean you, but some people still are like, that wasn't really that big of a deal, was it?
Yeah.
And it's like, dude, then why are we on the phone?
Well, I
Like,
see it like I know it obviously was a bit you were in the center of it. You got I mean obviously to this day like it's something that comes up a lot. You have to answer it and people give you shit. I remember I saw it from that point like I, I'm I liked Richard and Stephanie like I didn't have any problem with them. when it happened, I was like, yeah, I get it. I like, why wouldn't you go to fucking Vagrant over drive-through? Like, Vagrant is the obvious choice here. The way it happened too, and I was like, yeah, whatever, fuck them, I don't care. Like, he chose to go in a path. It's like, at the end of the day, it's a fucking decision, and then people get emotionally, and you're like, you're not the fucking person doing this. Like, who the fuck are you? So I think that if anyone has that's my perspective, and I could say that because I could give a shit about like people having so much energy about something someone else did, and you're like, live your own fucking life and relax.
Yeah,
So that's, I
yeah,
mean, I'm not putting words in your mouth. I'm just saying, like, this is my perspective as a fan from that time. I was just like, yeah, it was a smart fucking choice decision.
yeah. And there's just so many factors involved that by no means is it like a Kennedy assassination, but
Right.
like there's just so many things that we still can't even talk about that went down that people had no idea what was happening behind the scenes. And it's like, mind your business. Just mind your business. Like at a certain point, like Chris is a dude in a band, and I'm a person at and with a record label, and like everybody else can fuck off, you know?
How did that transfer to you getting a Vagrant?
I mean, it was really a whole separate thing.
Because you're still doing Fiddler this whole time. You're doing that up until 2004, and then now you're on Vagrant too.
Right, right. So I started touring heavily with my bands, and on one of the tours, we were with Saves the Day. For a couple of reasons, I hit it off better with Saves the Day. Let's just leave it at that. And I ended up switching teams and rolling with them instead. Through touring with Saves the Day, I met Rich Egan, who owned or co-owned Vagrant. At that point, I had already encountered Richard and Stephanie, and they had expressed interest in purchasing Swiss Army Romance from me and signing Chris, which are two separate transactions because I didn't own Chris's contract. Like we were just putting out record to record together. So I sold Swiss Army Romance to Drive Through, which largely financed my life and my label and moving to Los Angeles. And then Rich Egan offered me a job doing A&R at Vagrant. When Chris decided to not sign with Drive Through, that was the obvious decision. And I was still doing Fiddler when I worked at Vagrant, but it was very neglected because Vagrant was like a very demanding, hectic, crazy job. So I didn't stay there very long because I missed running my own thing. So that I think that's where everybody's confusion is. Like it's like there's a Fiddler, there's a Drive Through, there's a Vagrant, and who did what to who, and who signed where, and who has money, and it's just like
Yeah.
if you weren't there, don't worry about it. It doesn't fucking matter to you.
Okay.
So
Yeah. So did you like for that short stint of Vagrant though, did that open your eyes up to different things you could do with the label that you didn't think about, like for Fiddler, and that's why you like did it help the growth moving forward?
no, all I took away from Vagrant is that I wanted to be a kind, gentle person. Va Vagrant was really a hectic job. There wasn't any like Jedi training at Vagrant that I went and then took back to Fiddler and applied to my own method. It was more like I left Vagrant and I was like, oh man, I can't wait to do my own shit. Like, I can't wait to find my own bands. I can't wait to call the shots. I can't wait to like decide what I work on. I wanted to like be in charge, is what it is.
It's almost like because, I mean, obviously no design, so it's working for freelancing and then like going to an agency and you just see how crazy the hustle and bustle is and you're like, I think I'm good with just going back on my own and
Yeah, yeah, it's
doing
the
my
hustle
shit.
versus the grind. Like you're
Yeah.
either running uphill or running downhill, you know?
Yeah.
It was no, I definitely I think it's important. It was important for me to like work at another company to feel it, to be like, oh shit, like there's 20 people that work here and there's so many arms of it and everybody's moving and shaking. And then for me to be like, I think I'm cool with a tiny staff and doing things small.
It's a buddy of mine hit me up. He constantly he has a the two of us work for ourselves, and he started this iCryo business. So he's got employees and things like that, and he's a couple years younger than me. So we will get drinks and talk about shit. And he's like, man, you should really start an agency. I was like, there's no fucking way I want to do that. I was like, I don't want that annoyance of having staff. Like, I don't want employees. I don't want their shit. And I am cool doing it on my own and just having clients whenever I want to. So like, I
Yeah,
totally get it. It's there.
yeah,
It's not the dream to have X amount of employees and you're like, oh, you're $10 million a year business. You're like, okay, A, all that money's not yours, and B, you got to babysit and do all this other shit, and then there's all the way that people handle it. So yeah, I
yeah,
totally get it.
yeah, for sure.
Like, so Recover just came up, and this I'll probably just talk about this really quick, and then I'll end this. But Recover came up, and I was talking to Matt from Emmanuel about that, and he's like, that band had such an impact on so many bands, but he had mentioned that they when they got signed, and I was researching this, I don't have anything about it, but like when they got signed to the final label they were on, they recorded,
Drummer. Yeah.
yeah, they recorded like a full album, and then the label made them re-record it, and Matt's like, that's what killed them, or like something like that. That's why they ended up stopping or something. I don't know.
That's not really what killed them. They signed to Strummer, who was Gary Gersh's company, and it was like them, the Mars Volta, and La Tigra, and it was like
Oh wow.
supposed. Oh no, wait, was it Les 75 or La Tigra? I can't remember. But it was supposed to be like a juggernaut superstar label, and they recorded a full length. There were a lot of feelings about it, and then they went and re-recorded, and there was a couple things that ended Recover. There were some internal things, but externally, the label went broke. They put all of their
Shit.
money into these bands, and then it just didn't work. Their record was dead on arrival.
Oh man.
Whatever. But so there are two records that are Recover's final pieces of work. There's This May Be the Year I Disappear, and then there was what I had on my computer for years, what we just it was called B-sides, and it was called Challenger. And like 10 years ago, I was like, "Hey, we should put out Challenger." And they were like, "Yeah, let's put out Challenger." I put that out and we put it out on vinyl, and that's another one of those you can still buy it. Everybody really wants it, but it's
Wait,
right
you
there in the
can
store.
that's the record that they had to re-record?
That's it. It's
Whoa.
out.
I just asked someone, I just posted on my Instagram. I was like, does anyone know where I can find this record?
It's out.
How do you find
It's
it?
just search Recover. It's on every streaming service. You can buy it. You can even buy it in my web store.
Wait, that's awesome to know. I might just go do this actually. I liked that last record, so and then Matt said that this record, he's like, this is the lost record. He's like, this was the best one that they put out. What are your thoughts?
I agree. I mean, no. Okay, so I like Challenger more than This May Be the Year I Disappear, but I like some songs on that record more than the other. But for me, and I'm biased, but their EP that I put out is the best thing that they've ever done. The full lengths I think are fucking fantastic, but I'm just biased because I worked on the EP.
Okay, I'm gonna send this link to Matt Breen because he was telling me about it, so I'll see if he'll buy it too. It's not loading. God damn it, merch now. Let's go. So before I ask the two questions, was there a band you were working on signing that you really wanted and you just couldn't get?
Um, Emmanuel.
No shit.
I really loved them. I really loved them a lot. I had big ideas in my head for them. There's a couple I really loved Engine Down, and that didn't work out. I'm kind of glad it did though, because I'm still friends with them. I loved, so here's a fun one. The first time I ever met Max Bemis from Say Anything, we were outside of a show. I think it was at the El Rey, and I never knew him, never met him, didn't know who he was. And he walked up to me and he said, "You could have signed my band." And I said, "What?" And he said, "My band's called Say Anything." And I was like, "Dude, okay." Like I was like in shock. And I was like, I liked your band. Nobody ever called me. Nobody ever sent me anything. And he was like, what? And I was like, yeah, I would have signed you in a second, man. I love Say Anything.
Holy
And oddly
shit.
enough, we became friends after that. But there was some like weird miscommunication with some sort of agent manager person that said that they solicited stuff to me that never did. And then he signed to Doghouse, who I like just as much, but I was wildly jealous. Like I love Say Anything.
That album is I mean that is their best album, like
Is
by
a Real
far.
Boy is like a
Fucking amazing.
classic.
It's so great.
Yeah. So I don't know. I'm sure there's a couple more along the way. I'd have to sit and think about it. But yeah, that's pretty much it. I when I did the Vagrant podcast, I told a story about how I tried to get Rich to sign Jimmy Eat World, but that's not for Fiddler. That was for Vagrant.
Oh, Jesus. Is there, before I ask the last two questions, like I keep pushing this off, but is there a story you've always wanted to tell that like you never told anywhere that you're like, this is a fun story?
Um, there's so many stories I want to tell, but I can't tell them yet. The one story that I think would be fun that I haven't told before is, and it relates to your last question, is the format. Because, I mean, you remember the format? Yes?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh, I think you said before Matt. I
No,
didn't,
no,
the format.
the
Okay.
format. No, the format. So I did get a demo from the format, from Sam, who now runs Hello Merch, who runs all of my merch stuff in Arizona for me. Not just for me, but for the entire world. I got a demo from Sam. I drove out to Arizona to meet with them, and when I got there, they were like, the militia group is here. And I was like, cool, that's fun. You invited two labels to the same show, which is normal, by the way, but just like it's awkward always. And they talked to the militia group guys the whole night, and they didn't talk to me at all. And I just left. I was like, well, that's not going to work out at all. And then they signed with them, and I was very sad. It's not as funny of a story as I would like.
But it's interesting though. It's a very
But
interesting story.
I mean, years and years later, living in New York, Nate is, at the time he was dating, now he's married and has children with a friend of my husband's, and I'm at his wife's family house for like Hanukkah dinner or something, and Nate and I are sitting on a couch next to each other, and he's super shy and quiet, and I am, I don't know what I am, but I just had to tell him. I was like, "Hey, I tried to sign your band a long time ago." And he was like, "Really? What band?" And I was like, "I drove to Arizona to see the format. I really liked your band." And he was like, "Oh shit, that sucks." And I was like, "Yeah, it's okay. I got over it." And I was like, "Fun's really cool though." And he's like, "Yeah, it's doing well." And I was like, "Yeah, fun is great. That's you gotta slam dunk on there." So we, way later in life, we were friendly,
Oh my God.
but that I guess it is kind of a funny story. But
That's
yeah.
hilarious. I feel like the universe has a funny way of where you think it's kind of like for me this whole podcast for me is this I get to have questions answered that I had when I say this all the time like when I was 17 all these things I wanted to know I'm finding out now, which is awesome. So I think there's some things in life where you're kind of like where things are kind of left just with an open ending. It kind of has this like random close and you're like, wow, I was not expecting that to happen or
Yeah, yeah, no, I've learned to like make peace with that. Like there are things that are awkward that just wait, just wait. Like life comes back around. Like
hmm
if you would have told me that the band that I drove to Arizona, I think it was like in August. It was so hot that to go see play and love, and they totally ignored me. That like 15 years later, I'd be on a couch with the Ronson family and Nate playing Heads Up on our phones. Like I'd be like, what? That's super fucking weird. So yeah, it's the universe has ways of doing things. You just gotta,
yeah, it's fun.
yeah,
It's
yeah.
totally fun. Cool. Well, I'll wrap this up, and I do two questions. One, what would you like to plug? It could be anything you're doing, or it could be something a friend of yours is doing, or it could be both.
Great question. I I don't know what I want to plug. I wrote a book like 5 years ago. So if you want to read a book that I wrote that's all about touring with a band and like living in the music industry, you can find my book. You can shop small on Hello Merch and look for a book called A Million Miles, or you can shop big and destroy the planet and buy it on Amazon. Um, you just search A Million Miles and my full name, which is Amy Fleisher Madden. And, if I ever finish this photo book, I'd love to plug that as well, but it's not done yet.
Well, when you do finish it, let me know. I mean, not like I have a gigantic audience, but any media outlet where where you can
For
market it,
sure.
you let me know.
For sure. Thank you.
Absolutely. All right, last question. What scene ethics do you hold on to this day?
All of them. All of the scene ethics. And it's a bummer that some people never held on to them and never followed those rules, but I still do. I still I mind my P's and Q's, and, you know, I help the younger kids, and I answer the phone when people call and have questions, and, I return favors. I feel like it's almost like quality morals if you really get into it, but there's so many, and the scene is like you could write a book about the lack of morals in there, but I still find myself like, if someone needs help, you help them. And if somebody has a question, you answer it. I still have those very like thoughts ingrained in me.